Call the meeting to order Monday, October 2nd, 2023. Assistant Administrator, roll call.
Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Ball.
Present.
Councilmember Jensen.
Present.
Councilmember Maroney.
Present.
Councilmember Scott. Mayor Zierden.
Present. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Do I have a motion for the approval or amendment of the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as written.
A second.
Any other discussion?
If I may, real quickly, Mayor, just so you guys are aware, Tad Erickson, who was going to do the Safe Routes to School thing, emailed me. He couldn't be here tonight.
Okay. Administrator, are you going to be doing it? Oh, okay. So we're going to
It's
skip
Tad
that?
Erickson who's-
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can't do that presentation because he's not here, so.
Okay. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Open forum. Anyone want to come forward and talk about something not on the agenda? Okay, come forward. State your name and address.
My name is Diane Williams, 32744 Northwoods Lane. I'm on the Parks Committee. And I know there's parks issues on the agenda, which I'd like to speak to. And if I am wrong in my interpretation of how the parks functions, I hope someone will correct me. My understanding is that parks gets direction from the comprehensive plan, the park plan, and the city council. And then we are sort of dreamers. We come up with plans and ideas, suggestions. We do research for the council. We provide information to the council, and we report back before we move forward with anything. That's my understanding. Then as far as funding, we get money, we used to, I don't know if we do anymore, from park dedication fees, and then the bulk comes from the general fund. It's allocated to parks for parks use, but we don't spend it. We suggest to the council that this would be a good thing for the parks, and we'd like to spend our money on that. Final approval comes from you. And I'm concerned about expanding the park committee because we've had people with agendas, which have been very difficult to deal with. Also, I felt like because people who were previously involved with parks are by far outnumbered by people with new ideas and suggestions that, well, we can't go with the plans already in the works, we got to start fresh. So if every time we got new people, we went back to square one, nothing would ever happen. And I think if you are planning a new city hall, what if in 2024 people get elected who say, that's a stupid idea, we're not doing it. All your work would have been for nothing. So I kind of look at it as we're kind of floating down one of those lazy rivers on a tube. We're kind of going a direction. We're not going by leaps and bounds because government works slowly. People can join in and flow along with us and contribute coming from, say, tributaries. But to expect us to go back and start all over again is, to me, pointless to even have a park committee. Another thing, I am kind of curious why we would need a liaison back to council when we have Councilman Maroney to report back. It makes me feel like we're under suspicion, like we're going to do something underhanded or sneaky and we can't be trusted. I feel like Mike is perfectly capable of bringing messages back and forth, both ways. I don't understand that one. But I do feel like some of the people on the committee have not adequately been informed how we work, what our authority is, what our authority isn't, what our task is, what it isn't. And I think that's been part of the problem. So maybe we need some kind of class, or at least sit down with Dan or David, when new people come on, and explain to them sort of the ground rules. And I think we'll have a better committee and better outcomes. But I'm very concerned about expanding the committee with people who have agendas. And I've seen plenty of that this year.
Okay. I'll touch on just a couple things because a lot of what you just talked about, we will talk about when we get down to this. Just for one example, and it's not that it's Councilman Maroney, it's more the fact of, even when, Assistant Administrator came back to the committee last meeting, it wasn't actually the verbiage that I wanted that everyone to come and present for every council meeting, right? That's actually not what I wanted, but that there is a miscommunication in government, right? I feel like when council, city, staff, and committees, right? We need to work on improving that communication, improving that process. And when committees come up with recommendations, I don't want to just hear the recommendation. I want to hear how they came to that recommendation. What did they talk about? Well, and I think that there's an ownership within the committee that I want the committee to be able to take. There's an autonomy I also want them to have. For example, bathrooms. They wanted to discuss bathrooms, but they couldn't discuss bathrooms. By the time you wait for the council to tell you to discuss bathrooms, then it goes back to committee, they discuss it, it goes back to we got 4 months that we've basically used for communication that we could have just said, you know what, you guys can discuss bathrooms if it's something that you feel is the right conversation to have at that time. So I think all encompassing, I understand everything that you're saying as far as even the perception of it, but I think at the end of the day, when we're looking at building, you guys are working on your master plan, that's a foundational document to the city that we've never had before. And I think the more input that we have from members, the more ways that we're able to give you guys more autonomy to make decisions so that when you come to us, we are, ready to say, you know what, if they made that decision, we trust that that's the best decision. So we will get into it a little bit more later, but I think at the end of the day, the goal is to create a foundation that allows for more empowerment from our residents so that we don't end up in situations like we've ended up this year.
Well, we did have a capital improvement plan for parks, sort of our own subdivision of the comp plan for the city.
Yeah.
So we were working from a plan. We're not a rogue group of people going nuts here. We are working.
I understand, I do.
We are working on things that have been discussed, we've had public input, and we're just plotting.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. And like I said, we will talk about it a little bit later and kind of the reasoning behind it. Obviously, it's council's vote on whether or not they think it's a good idea, but I think at the end of the day, it is important to get differences of opinions on the same committee, right? It is important to gather that information before we look at, master plans for Park and Rec. I want to give you guys that ability to make decisions without us all the time, right? I think that would empower you guys to dream bigger and be able to go out and do the things that the residents would like us to do. So I think, again, I understand where you're coming from, maybe with the perception, but I want to let you know it's with all in good intent.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with all you said, but you're the mayor.
Well, thank you.
Oh, one last thing. I want to comment on the disc golf, since you brought up the disc golf. Some of the vitriol that was been directed at different people participating and trying to get the disc golf going. I think it's totally unseemly, and I totally disapprove of that. I don't know when we got permission to become uncivilized, and it's very regrettable. And I would, if any of them were here, I would extend an apology to them from me, just because I feel bad for them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a procedural point of clarification? So open forum is intended for residents to bring forward items not on the agenda. Park and Rec membership is clearly on the agenda. So how is it that we're sitting here engaging in a conversation about an agenda item when for how many meetings prior to this, it has been made very clear?
Because I gave the same respect to other people all year long, more than 3 minutes, which was the maximum allowed time. We listened to over 3 hours of testimony. When people come to the stand, genuinely, I'm going to let them talk.
Whether it's
Whether it doesn't matter who it
regarding
was. It doesn't, Bill Toft has come up here and asked to also say things that are on the agenda. We've allowed it. Other people have come up here and asked for the same courtesy, and I'm going to continue to do that. Doesn't matter what side of the aisle that they're on an issue. If they're coming to the podium, I'm going to let them talk. I don't think that it's that big of a deal. And we've done it for both sides.
Okay, well, it seems to me that people have been not allowed to address this council on matters that are on the agenda. So again, I'm just looking for a procedural point of clarification, because I'm totally in agreement with you. People should be treated in a very similar and equitable manner. And I guess, since I've been on this council, I've been seeing somewhat of a double standard when it comes to that.
Well, I would disagree with you, but that's your perspective, and I can respect that. But as far as the meeting goes, this is me allowing people who come to the podium, if they ask to speak on something, and I feel like it's an appropriate time or discussion, I'm going to let them have that.
So we're not really about following procedure then, is what we're...
No, I run the meeting, so
Oh.
thank you. Anybody else? Are you going to talk about?
Bill Toft, 31877 Green Sea Drive. I do appreciate you letting me speak on items that are on the consent agenda or the agenda, because sometimes we can't stay 2 or 3 hours like some of these meetings have been going.
Right.
Like 3 quick items. I know you got a huge agenda tonight. First of all, the Park and Rec representative, Madam Chair Zierden, is here tonight, and we requested that that we make the presentations, if we could be first, because my wife's a teacher. She is not home yet. I know.
Yes.
Mrs. Zierden works just as hard as my wife does, so if she could go to A instead of D, I know she'd greatly appreciate it. The second point, I hope you guys address the permit tonight. There was a tournament in the disc golf expansion area 2 weeks ago, which there wasn't supposed to be. They got around it, I guess, by calling it an event, and there was no heads up to the city. I talked to Mr. I emailed Mr. Chansky, and I talked to Mr. Ike, and neither of them knew what was going on down there, so I guess the procedure before, they could just show up and use the facility. So I hope we get that permit issued. The other item, which is on the consent agenda, but I think it's really important, the FNC corporate resolution certification tonight that you guys are going to look at. I'm assuming you guys have taken a look at that. There's no way that one person should be authorized to make all those transactions and all those decisions based on the city's money. If you read the resolution, it states they can short stock, they can buy stock, they can buy options, they can send out third-party checks. Assuming I read the resolution correctly, I talked to a chief financial officer, a retired CFO, and he said they never, ever set up anything like that. What they typically do is split the duties. Mr. Chansky would handle maybe the transactions, and then someone would be looking at his decisions with the receipts and the confirms and all that. Or you have 2 or 3 people. I've set up LLCs before for customers, but you've raised money, Madam Mayor. I'm assuming you've seen where there's more than one person that is in charge of making authorizations and transactions. I might have to call 3 people once in a while on a customer, but you just do it. I just think to take care of the city's money, I mean, it's our money. It's not, if it was Mr. Chansky's, I wouldn't be saying anything because that's his money, but this is our money. So I think it'd be really good to take a real hard look at that. And that's it. Thanks a lot for your time.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Are you guys okay with having Megan Zierden go first on the presentations?
It's not a need tonight.
Are you sure? Okay, okay. All right, anybody else? All right, we will move on to the presentations, and I will invite up Matt Killian, and is David coming up first? You so?
Good evening. I would gladly let you go, Megan, if she wanted to. That's how much respect I have for Megan Zierden. My name is David Spizo. I have worked in some capacity via committee or volunteer or just general business interactions with everybody on the council. So thank you very much for taking the time and getting us on the agenda to talk about this. This is not a new concept in the country or in the state, but it is a new concept to Breezy Point. And I'm very excited about it. I think it has a great potential for our area from the standpoint of tourism. And I hope you will listen to this presentation with an open mind. And with that being said, I'd like to turn it over to Matt Killian, the head of the Brainerd Chamber of Commerce.
All right. Thank you, David. Hello and good evening, Mayor Zierden and council members. Appreciate the time. David also serves on our board of directors, and just a little bit about the Brainerd Lakes Chamber. We are 1,100 business members strong. We represent the entire area, and we have offices not only in Brainerd, but we operate the Cross Lake and Pequot Lakes Chamber, as well as the Highway 371 Welcome Center south of town. What we're presenting tonight is, I think, an exciting concept, and it's probably the biggest thing since bringing Paul Bunyan to the Brainerd Lakes area in the 1920s. That's how meaningful this is and what a game changer it can be. What we're talking about is the private sector joining forces. We're talking about chambers and tourism entities joining forces, and we're talking about 23 different cities and townships joining forces to allow us to be a major Midwest player as a tourism destination, and it be regional. And what we're presenting tonight is a concept of this Regional Convention and Visitors Bureau. If you're not familiar with the organizations, I guarantee you have encountered them in the past. So anytime that you've visited a major tourism destination in the United States, you've likely seen marketing from these organizations that entice you to travel there and stay overnight. The Brainerd Lakes area, and we'll get to that in a minute, but we're one of the few communities in the state of Minnesota that doesn't have one, which is really a shock when you think about what a major tourism destination that we already are. It's different than a chamber because it's got one set focus, and that focus is destination marketing that generates overnight stays. Chambers work on networking and business training and workforce development and government affairs and everything else that we do as a full-service chamber. This has one sole mission, and that is to bring people here, bring business travel here, and generate the economic benefits from doing so. They are funded, we're funded by membership dues and a variety of other transactions. These organizations are funded by a lodging tax that you can pass as a local government up to 3%. You do not need state approval to do that, unlike a local option sales tax. And these are very common instruments, as you'll see throughout the state of Minnesota. I would just reiterate before I even get past this slide, this is not a tax on residents. This is just lodging only, brick and mortar, short-term lodging only. It's not on restaurants, it's not on boat rentals, it's not on camp firewood, it's just on that. And the residents derive the benefits of the tax, but the residents don't pay for it directly. So our goals, next slide here, is really to expand the year-round tourism economy. We do really well here in the summertime. We can do better year-round, and we can reach more people with more horsepower to do it. So we're talking about a Midwestern area, not just being the conquerors of the Twin Cities marketplace. We want to go beyond that. We want to give our lodging properties more revenue to drive demand up for their existing rooms and cabins. And then we'll get into events. And one of the reasons why our big resorts are supportive is because this convention, the Sea of Convention, is active sales and lead generation to bring business groups here. And that's what floats their boat year round, not just in the summertime. So the one thing that I wanted to mention as a city when we talk about economic benefits, and these are things that you already know, right? When someone comes up here, they're going to stay 1, 2, 7 nights, whatever it is. there's economic benefit beyond just the lodging. So you may not know that if a person comes up for an evening or a week and spends X amount on lodging, they're likely to spend at least 3 times more on their restaurant purchases, for example, and their retail, and all the different ways that they support the community. The one thing that I wanted to point out to you, this is a study that we in the tourism industry know, not everybody knows it. It was done in Colorado in 2016, and it basically says that you're more likely to look favorably on a region that promotes itself in one that you visited. So the two numbers are, when you see the marketing or visit an area and you have a good experience, you're 76% more likely to move there and 54% more likely to start a business there. So this is economic impact beyond just the tourism industry alone. This next slide is kind of how our area looks as far as a tourism landscape. We have a number of chambers that are in the area. We have some other tourism entities here. What I would say is that we all do really good work independently, and we partner occasionally, but we essentially are operating within silos. This brings everybody together, at least the chambers, so that we can accomplish more than any one organization can accomplish alone. I'm going to refer to your packet here. This is the one that says Minnesota's CVB and DMO budget. This looks at the state, and I know that people in the audience can't see the packet, but there's about 100 organizations that collect this tax. 100 municipalities. About 40 million annually collected in Minnesota, and this is how they're ranked. These are 2019 numbers. You'll see a couple of ones highlighted. Visit Brainerd, that collects from Brainerd and Baxter, and then Whitefish Lodging Association, which is in the Cross Lake area. When you put all of those dollars together, combined with what we spend as chambers, at best we're in the middle of the pack. The Brainerd Lakes area should not be in the middle of the pack. We're arguably the top tourism destination. We're certainly among the top 3. And yet what we're spending and what we're achieving is middle of the pack, and this corrects that by putting in revenue where we need it most. We hear this, see this quote, hear this quote all over the state with our other destination brethren. That they say, and we've heard this, I've heard it for 10 years, if the Brainerd Lakes area ever got its act together, we'd be in trouble, but don't worry, they'll never get their act together. Because we've been siloed for so long, they just assume that they can compete head to head with us. We think this is a solution that essentially, like I said, changes the game. So what we're talking about is that Explore Brainerd Lakes CVB. We can call it whatever we want. That's one concept because we own that Explore Brainerd Lakes brand. We can put Lakes area. It could be called a lot of different things. So it would be under the Brainerd Lakes Chamber, which is the regional entity. We wouldn't have to start a new organization. And then what we looked at was the keys to success: one marketing strategy, one brand, high degree of transparency, the industry leadership that I talked about, and then of course the sufficient budget to actually make a difference. I'm just going to quickly go through the focus areas of the CVB. I may have forgot to mention that we've been at this for over a year now. I've personally met with about 40 lodging properties, and all of your properties within the Breezy Point area, Breezy Point Resort, and then Narvison Management that does leisure suites, they're all in support of this. So really the destination marketing would be targeting what we can't now, and that's new areas and new travelers. So the new areas would be the Midwest. If you talk to David, he talked to you about not only getting travelers from the Twin Cities, but they also are very successful reaching into Canada. You talk to Grandview Lodge, for example, and they're drawing out of Iowa and Chicago. We barely hit the North Dakota area or even into Wisconsin. We could be drawing from a much larger catchment area than we currently are. We always kind of tend to pound the Twin Cities. The other thing is targeting user groups that travel for their activities. So mountain bikers, snowmobilers, hunting and fishing, and the list goes on. Talked to a lot of small resorts that tell me about how grandma and grandpa always book the same week every year, and they've done that for 30 years. They always have that third week in July, they book 3 or 4 cabins, the whole family comes out. The question that they're asking themselves right now is what happens when grandma and grandpa pass away? And can they count on those kids to come back? And so what's the next generation? This allows us to be more sophisticated in our marketing. The second one is the attraction and expansion of major tourism events. We look at like our event in Cross Lake, the St. Patrick's Day Parade, draws anywhere from 20 to 30,000 people. They make a weekend of it, massive economic impact. I think about the ice fishing extravaganza and what that brings. What could we invest in that's happening locally that would have high potential? And then could we bring new things here? Could we bring Hockey Day in Minnesota, for example, would be one. I think about what Duluth did with Bentleyville. If you've seen the Christmas light show, they were able to put marketing horsepower behind that. It fills every room in the Duluth area, especially in Canal Park, from Thanksgiving to Christmas. That's a notoriously hard time to attract visitors. So what could our event be? And could we be actively seeking out events to bring here? The third and last area is the lead generation for conventions, corporate, and group. So we're talking about corporate conferences, we're talking about golf, we're talking about weddings. And it's reaching into the meeting planners that are looking for those next locations to host these meetings, and then we fill conference spaces, not necessarily in the summer, but in those shoulder seasons and off season when we don't have the guests that we want to create that economic impact. So very quickly, the lodging tax overview, there are more than 100 as I mentioned. 95% of the tax has to be used to promote tourism. You can't use it for anything else by Minnesota statute. It's not a tax on residents, it's just on that short-term lodging. And then Minnesota cities, I think I mentioned, have the opportunity to collect 3%, up to 3% without state approval. If you go above that, then you need state approval. We're not asking for that. You'll see that like in Minneapolis and Duluth has some pretty hefty taxes. That's not what we're after here. So this is the region. This is what we started with. There's 23 different cities and townships in this region. This is kind of where our members are located. One exciting new development is that we're moving into the Cuyuna area, the Crosby-Deerwood area. Rutgers and their new ownership group called Odyssey Resorts, they own a number of properties on the North Shore. They are very enthusiastic about this, so that's opened the door into the Cuyuna and Crosby area. And then I mentioned the other two existing organizations, Baxter and Brainerd is Visit Brainerd. Ideal in the Cross Lake and Jenkins area actually is a Whitefish Area Lodging Association. We're actively working on partnerships to try to bring them in the fold. We're respecting everything that they're doing now because they're doing a good job. The revenue potential, all chambers combined, our budgets, tourism marketing is probably $300,000-$400,000. Conservatively, it'd be $2.1 million. This places us as a major player in the state, in the Midwest. This is admittedly a cocktail napkin calculation because it's hard to get at the numbers. I took a look at Department of Revenue numbers for hospitality businesses, but you have to exclude all of those things I mentioned. It's just the lodging only. And then when we look at, for instance, Cass County, we have to exclude Walker area because that's not what we're proposing here. So our very conservative estimates is 1.3 to 2.1 million on tourism marketing, and that does not include any of the VRBOs. I know we met with Mayor Zierden and Administrator Chansky. It sounded like you have about 40, 45, something like that of VRBOs. They would not be exempt from the tax, but they would also not be exempt for the benefits. They would certainly derive benefits for additional marketing. Just a few more slides, guys. So the structure of this and the way that we're engineering it with some help from a consultant is that all areas and properties need to be represented to make it work. Everyone needs to feel like they're getting their fair share of that marketing. We don't see a reason to create a brand new organization when the chamber already exists, so this would be an operating division of our organization. It'd be led by an independent board, have its own staff, and we're committed to providing the transparency on the reporting. This is another consultant that I mentioned before. She helped us with this. This is what a board could look like, and you see all the different types of properties and retail restaurant. Elected official would serve on the board as an ex officio member. And this board would meet monthly, not unlike the chamber board does, with the express purpose of making sure that we spend that money wisely. The organizational chart, the only thing I'd mention there is that the light blue positions are positions that we already have. So we don't have to create a lot of overhead for a new organization. We can use the chamber's existing staffing structure to be efficient. And then I mentioned the proposed budget. If you look toward the end of that same packet that starts with the map, you can see how that money could be spent. This was a recommendation from the consultant that ran Visit Duluth and now does national tourism marketing. And you can see how that would be spent in the various different areas, sales, marketing. She's got a lot of things in there, but you can see that we have a target for budgeting. The other thing that I would mention is that there'd only be 32% of the budget that'd be used for personnel and overhead. So the vast majority of this would be marketing outside the area. I mentioned that all Breezy Point lodging properties support the CVB. If you look on that the very last page, you'll see some of the other properties I talked with. These are all enthusiastic supporters. There are people that I've talked to that I would say are neutral. They aren't necessarily pounding the table for it, but they'd like to see how things progress. So there's probably another 10 to 15 properties that aren't listed here that we've been meeting with. And then the timeline that we're talking about is starting an ordinance, starting tax collections in 2025. So this gives the properties plenty of time to gear up, to let their guests know about it, and to fully understand the process, which would be remitting quarterly. So what we're asking for you is to be the pioneer. You're the first of the 23 that we're approaching. We have a meeting with the city of Nisswa doing the same presentation on October 17th. We thought Breezy Point would be an ideal first choice because all of your lodging properties are supportive. What I would say there is, if you look at the last packet, we had Attorney Brad Person of Breen & Person. He's the city attorney for Cross Lake and Baxter, and they have lodging taxes ordinances already in place. So he researched the state statute, so he's included that in there. So you can see that it is allowable on the local level. And then he's also had an FAQ memo as well as a sample ordinance for your consideration. Administrator Chansky has not seen this yet. I understand he's out this week. The last point I'd make is that the city can retain up to 5% for your administration costs, and that is also in the ordinance itself. So with that, I will wrap it up. That's a lot of information in a short amount of time, but I wanted to make sure that you knew that this wasn't half-baked, that we've been at it for over a year, and that all of our I's are dotted and T's are crossed. So I was asking for your support and possibly considering an ordinance as soon as the November meeting. And I can take any questions.
None for me.
I apologize. When did you say an ordinance would have to be passed at the city level?
You could, there's no timeline as far as when it would need to be passed, but we think a good target date would be January 1st, 2025 for enacting it, because it leaves the properties plenty of time to prepare. Just to keep the process moving, meeting with David Chansky, he thought November could be a potential meeting where he could consider it.
Of 2024?
Next month.
Okay. Okay.
One of the things that I had maybe brought up as an idea to consider, because Breezy, as you know, collecting, we would be able to keep up to 5% of that. We could use that towards something like our Park and Recs committee, right? So then now we are generating a little bit of revenue for the city, and we can apply that to something that would benefit the residents as far as additional income. So that was one thing that I had, thought might be good, to use tourism as a means to fund some of the projects that we may have here instead of it all coming from the taxpayers.
What's your experience with that 5% administration? Just what you might have learned or picked up from other communities that are doing that? I mean, I don't get the sense that the city staff are really all that directly involved in, the administration of the sales tax, so I'm just trying to figure out.
Yeah, it's a good question. The education needs to happen with the short-term rental homeowners. So the VRBO, Airbnbs, you have that licensing ordinance already in place, so you know who they are. We've actually worked with one of our board members that owns a property management company, and the way that you set these things up on these platforms, there's 3, Airbnb, VRBO, and Booking.com. It's a little different to set up the tax, so there's some education. And I would suggest for instance, if you're going to consider this in November or December or whenever, that we invite the VRBOs here. We want this done in the daylight, and they should see the presentation and all that as well. I haven't heard any cities that are that the collections have been way more time than they anticipated. 90+% are going to come from established lodging properties, and you don't have that many of them here. But the VRBOs would take a little education. But like I said, they're going to benefit along with everyone else.
What resources are available to a short-term rental that they're acting as their own rental agent to set up this tax?
Resources.
I mean, how to set it up.
Yeah, so what we would do, working with the gentleman that I mentioned, he's already done tutorial videos on how they're set up. So we have that in place, and we'd be happy to work with whoever to set that up.
Okay, thank you.
Did you say that there are 10 other properties or a number of other properties that you're in conversation with that would be affected by this lodging tax?
Not in the city of Breezy Point.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've met with upwards of 50 properties one-on-one. And, we're starting with the cities. There are ones in different townships, but there's one here, 2 there. They're not the priority. We want to start with the cities first. But there aren't properties in the city of Breezy Point we have not met with, to my knowledge.
There are not any?
There are not any additional properties that we have yet to meet with.
Does this affect timeshare?
David, I don't believe so, unless they're...
No, timeshares would be owned, so this would not affect.
Just the
timeshare.
rental portion?
Just their overnight, short-term lodging.
Okay, thank you. And you speak about, we're one of the first to be presented. Now, if City of Breezy Point joins in, the next does not. Does the whole plan fall apart? Do you do something? Like, is it a kind of an all or nothing plan, or?
Certainly the major cities need to be on board. If for some reason after this, and that's why we're looking at 2025, but if for some reason we weren't successful in some of the other major cities, I think then you'd have a decision to make as to whether or not we wanted to move forward with just one. The only way this works is that everyone joins forces and we're marching forward together.
I'll add that, yeah, from our standpoint, it's all or nothing. If we can't get everybody else on board, then it doesn't make any sense for us to do this.
Sure. Okay.
And Nisswa being the other biggest with Grandview and, yeah. Which you'll have an idea from them as to.
On October 17th,
Okay.
we'll know. I believe with the city that this is a 2-meeting decision, first and second reading of the ordinance. So we'll have some sense of whether they want to advance it after October 17th.
Okay. Thank you.
What's your timeline for meeting with other communities? I'm just thinking of Brainerd Baxter area and,
We would not meet with Brainerd and Baxter because they have an existing organization. We'd like to work with the Visit Brainerd organization. The other cities would be, Lake Shore would be one, East Gill Lake would be one, Crosby, Deerwood. I'm trying to think if there's any other major ones. Those would be the
And
major
Cross Lake
cities.
has their 1%, so they have
their
a,
1%. We've been actively meeting with them to talk about merging, but right now, I'm not sure the result of that yet. It might just be a partnership for now, but we'd sure like to have them on board if they see benefit for it.
The cities that manage it on their own, they're just sort of handling all that marketing and stuff on their own with that 1% there?
No,
Getting-
they fund it, there's a separate organization called the Whitefish Area Lodging Association, that's the recipient of that. I do not believe you could pass an ordinance to have the city do its own marketing. It would have to flow through a external organization.
Other organization, okay.
so can you clarify just a little bit as to how this doesn't involve Brainerd Baxter area?
So Brainerd and Baxter has a 3% lodging tax already for properties that are within Brainerd and Baxter. The bulk of them are in Baxter. Those would be all the kind of the nationally branded hotels like the American and the Super 8s and Comfort Inn and things of that nature. They have an organization already established called Visit Brainerd. They collect about $400,000 or $500,000. We have not approached them about a merger. We would be open to that. Our sense is that they would like to stay independent for now, but we could see partnering on certain types of marketing or projects to benefit everyone. But that's part of this patchwork of different organizations that we have that we're trying to navigate through, while respecting that they've done a lot of good work.
Thank you.
any other questions? All right, thank you, guys.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so we will
Before we move on real quickly, ma'am.
Yep.
So do you guys want us as staff to put some stuff together and bring this back to you for further consideration?
Yes, we'll see how the meeting with Nisswa goes and,
Okay. I only ask because if you want to direct us to bring it back in November, December, or sometime around there, do you guys have a sense of timing or anything like that? Or do you just want to wait until Mr. Killian reaches back out to us and maybe we talk about it at that point, or?
I feel like maybe a workshop,
As I
it
say,
would
under
be something
October.
that would maybe be appropriate,
If we
one of
can
our
fit it in our
workshops,
October
potentially.
workshop, that'd be
Yeah.
awesome.
yeah, because there's some other things that we'll need to talk about for that as well, so.
Yeah.
But we would like for you to be in communication with them so that you do get the update, so that when we, we can decide from there if it goes on the agenda for November.
Okay, so then for right now, not setting a date or nothing, we're just going to keep in contact with Matt Killian, kind of keep an eye on everything. We'll bring it to you guys if he has more information to say, hey, do you want to set up a workshop now at that point?
Yep, that would be fine.
That
Okay,
makes sense.
Yeah. that
Okay,
makes sense.
Do you
consensus
want
is
that
good
in a
on that.
motion, or?
No, consensus is good on that. If you were going to bring it back, I'd say yes, but that's fine.
All right, next up, Superintendent Kurt Stump.
Good to go.
Yeah, you should be. The mouse is right next to you there. It's a little finicky, just,
Mayor Zierden, members of the council, thanks for having me. I'm Kurt Stump, Superintendent, Pequot Lake School District. First off, I will echo everyone's sentiment about Mrs. Zierden and her work ethic, and she's a great representative of our school district's staff. So I'm here to talk about the referendum, and I will have a 5-minute presentation, and then I will leave a couple minutes. I know you got a long agenda tonight, so I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do want to make a couple opening remarks before I forget. Again, the main point is for me just to inform you, our public, both in person and viewing audience, about the referendum. And if any of you have further questions, I would more than entertain a cup of coffee somewhere or come to the school and visit, and I'd give you a tour, and that's an open invitation to our community members as well. It's my job to inform. So that's the first thing. Second thing is on the back table, I did place two handouts. The first one was just a one-page handout on the referendum, and the second is an application for an absentee ballot for those constituents that aren't going to be around in November or do want to vote early, since early voting has started. So here we go. I will sort of fly through the presentation, and like I said, if you want to go in depth on the topic, we can do that either now or preferably at a different time. Okay, I'm gonna try. Maybe.
You want to use the arrows on the side. The right side.
Right side arrows.
Yeah, the navigation arrows.
Just right there. If you don't know, the school district has more than 1,800 students K-12, and this is the first time that we are actually over that number. We're about 1,805 this year and continue to grow and get new students in every week, and about 240 faculty and staff. And like I said, we've continued to grow over the past 20 years. We have some facility challenges, and some of those are listed on there, and I'll highlight a couple, whether it be safety and security at our entrances, updating those. And if you've ever been at Eagleview or high school before school or after school, you know our parking lots and traffic flow have a lot of issues as well as infrastructure, including HVAC units, roofing, building envelope, some sidewalks, and we actually have inadequate classroom space as well. We currently have teachers on carts, which I found out my last meeting. Not everybody knows what that means. That just means most teachers have a home that students can go to, and when at the beginning of the day they have a place where they can check in. And so we got some teachers, because we don't have enough classrooms, that just have their materials on a cart and travel classroom to classroom and make it work. Same thing, we have a science teacher currently in a non-science classroom without water or proper chemical storage, as well as two FACS teachers or family and consumer science cooking teachers and one cooking lab. So we're trying to make it work despite our facility constraints. We have an inadequate and outdated auditorium and some playgrounds and outdoor spaces that are inadequate as well. So we had a community-led process that started in January of 2022, hired an architectural and engineering firm, studied our current facilities, and then the community-led process started a year ago, and worked through that with about 60 people. 30 or 40 attended each session, and they gave input and then ultimately came with a recommendation to the board that would meet our facility needs now and into the future. The plan is to have two questions on the ballot in November. We're the only questions on the ballot. The first one is a 10-year, $500,000 capital projects levy that will go for technology buses and other vehicles. And the second question can only pass if question one passes, and that is for the $76.5 million bond. I'll get into those questions in a little bit more in these next two slides. So the capital projects levy can only be used for technology district vehicles because that's the state statute. There's only so many uses for those funds, and we definitely have more than $500,000 in those funds. So it not only would help for payment of those district vehicles, buses, vans, and technology, but it also helped to open up some funds out of our general fund to offset some of the operating cost if question one or if question two passes. Because whenever you open up new spaces, you have additional operating costs, and I think the school board, well before my time, has operated very conservatively with their budget, and rightfully so, have done a great job with the funding that has been given to them. So that's question one, is a 10-year, $500,000 capital projects levy. That will also tap into our entire tax base. You hear some school districts have an operating referendum, and if we would have went that route, well, we would have had more flexibility. We'd actually only tapped into our residential or our homeowners, and so we decided to do the capital projects levy. And the second question is a $76.5 million bond. And again, it can only pass if question one passes. The bond has a number of different areas, from safety, security, expanded parking lots, infrastructure. Career and technical education is a term that we use in schools. I'm not sure how widely used it's outside of schools, but that's our Woods Metal Robotics project, Lead the Way. Currently in need of those spaces, and we got just growing demand from our students, and as well as some culinary art spaces with 2 teachers and 1 room that is outdated for that group. And then we, again, are asking for more classrooms, a new science room, a larger auditorium. Current one seats about 325. The one in the plan would call for 750 seat auditorium. Additional classroom space for early childhood and a large motor space, and then outdoor spaces, including a baseball, softball complex, working with the city of Pequot Lakes, tennis courts, and track and field improvements. And again, this is just a high-level view. There's a lot more details within it. The cost breakdown, as you can see from the chart, our residential homestead is about 41% of our tax base, and our commercial seasonal recreational is about 51% of our tax base. So again, if we would have chose a different capital or operating levy for question 1, it would only utilize at 41%. So that's why question 1 is written the way it is, to utilize our entire tax base. We know tax impact plays a role in how people vote, and so we want to be transparent and upfront. Those are 3 different home values in front of you: $250,000 home, $400,000, and $800,000. But we encourage our residents to go online, patriot-vision.org, and they can use the tax calculator to figure out exactly what their parcel, the impact on their parcel would be, and that is on our website. If the plan's approved, we'll go through the design development and the bid process and in multi-year projects. And then if it's not approved, then we'll just work with our school board and re-engage our community and identify the next best step forward. And ultimately, our voters will decide, and we will abide by their decision. Early voting has started September 22nd. So again, absentee ballots, those applications are available. They can vote early at the Crow Wing County Elections Office, and then in-person voting on November 7th. We have 2 combined polling places, one in Pequot Lakes, one in Cross Lake. There's a bunch of information on some websites and on Facebook pages. I hopefully met my 5-minute mark.
You did a good job.
That's all I have for right now. I can entertain some questions.
Anyone have any questions?
I have one question. Is there any plans before the residents vote on the referendum to have an open house, say at the high school, a question and answer session, or the, elementary school? I've followed this since, the release of the website. And all I've seen, and I could be mistaken, where there was a couple events at Lakes Latte to answer questions, but will there be any additional, open houses like we do for projects?
Thank you. That's a great question. As of right now, we don't have a large community one. I know I've got certain groups. We've got a group next Tuesday that's going to bring their group at 5:30 and meet with me. And so I will personally give any tours that people want and try to answer questions and target the information to what their interests are. So there's no large group at this time, but I am more than willing to make myself available in the morning, at night, during the day to answer questions, give tours, or come to meetings. The best way that I've seen is me coming to people and presenting information, as opposed to them taking a different meeting time and coming to the school. But as of now, no. But
Okay, thank you.
And I know I've seen impromptu or boards set up at sporting events. I've seen at the varsity volleyball, the varsity football games, but that's really more in tune for students and athletes and those who are participating. So I think where Mr. Jensen's going is just general public, so.
yeah, and again, I will encourage any of you, if you belong to any other groups, or even if it's a coffee group in the morning, you want me to come and visit them and answer some questions, I would love to do that at any time.
Any other questions? No?
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. All right, Ms. Searden.
I'm sure. Good evening, Mayor Zierden and council. Thank you for having me here tonight. It was asked of our team, or what we understood from our committee, was to bring information about park and recreation to city council, just for increased clarity. And so the committee asked for me to do the first one to kick us off, and then as needed, and we're going to talk about that, how frequent is this going to actually be and things like that. But so you're going to get a little bit of background, but then also what is our most recent work we've been doing. So historically, the group, the committee recommends projects to city council, and we've worked basically off of a capital improvement plan. I've got an old version. This is, I think, the one that we're still working off of. There's obviously comprehensive plans, and we update and revise them. In the past, it's been a 5-member committee prior to 2023. It was historically very hard to get members, people actually begging. So it's been a change in that. And then we've been a group that has all these really big dreams, but a really small budget, like $14,000. And we're hoping to maybe just buy a piece of musical equipment for the park. I don't even know when I joined, but we did have the city park, the Breezy Point Drive Park, some people call it the SAD Park, the Swimming Beach, Four Seasons Trail Park, and North Drive Boat Landing. Since I've joined the committee members and I have all worked together. We've created, well, they already had it plotted out, the Channel Park fishing dock, and we actually had to go undo it and redo it and make it a floating dock. We've done the disc golf course. We've done other improvements. This is just some of them, but we've paved the ramp and put new docks at the boat access, added musical instruments, all new equipment, even the beach, having things become more accessible for all residents and all visitors for that matter, and building up our riprap so it doesn't wash away all the time, and just trying to be mindful of our spending and so on. Our current committee members, you can see there, and Joe Garcia is ex officio typically there, and Michael Maroney is our liaison. So you can see that it's a 7-member committee, and then 2 additional non-voting people that are typically there. So what have we been working on? Basically completing projects that are started and maintain or improve parks that we already have. My interest as a park committee member over these years has been to look at all projects and making sure that council has everything they need to make decisions for the future of the Park and Recreation Department. And I've said it, I think Diane's heard it a million times, but rather than add more projects necessarily all the time, we need to continue to maintain what we have and do well with what we have and keep that viable and take care of those things. So we have been working off of that 2020 CIP plan that I have here. It was a 5-year plan, and then long-term goals and all the years marked out, and then obviously anything that council brings to us, that's our direction that we try to follow. We've also been working on updating our master park plan. There was one from 2011, which was obviously very outdated. So in addition to our committee meetings, we are having workshops after these meetings that to plug away at that work too. Things were happening slower than we want, and so we're trying to chunk away, get things as updated with our new priorities. But obviously, as time passes and membership changes, there's always new ideas brought forward and so on. Here are just some of the ideas that have been brought to Park and Rec over the years. I'm not going to read them all, but you can see, and this is just some of them. And the thing here is we actually like a lot of these concepts. they haven't been added to our plan yet. And instead of, in education, they say, don't chase the newest shiny object because we'll never be getting anywhere or doing anything. And so it's like, all right, it might feel slow, but we prioritize the things that we're working on now 5 years ago. And obviously some things have changed and so on, but we are trying to just do the right work. And while moving forward with our plans, we also need to make sure that we are making educated, informed recommendations to City Council as well. So other tasks that we need to do that we've been talking about is we need to update our park maps, like badly. Signage, we need to update just our plan, the plan that we're working off of. And it's just kind of a never-ending list. So our last meeting, you can see the topics that we were brought to our team, our committee. And so the outcomes from that was we've decided that committee members can rotate, taking turns to present to City Council if that's something you guys are wanting. Couple questions from that were how often, is it just for big projects, big recommendations? Wanted to remind that it's always, our meetings are recorded. One thing that I had voiced that can happen is no matter, we're human, and no matter how we try to summarize a meeting, unintentionally, sometimes it can be, I don't know, bias or something like that, no matter how neutral that you try to stay. So if you want to hear it from the horse's mouth, I guess, if you're able, please watch the meetings and honestly just reach out. Like, I'm happy to share. Sometimes there's people wondering things and they just need to ask me or any member of the committee. You're more than welcome to do that as well. We met and discussed mostly the event permit the past meeting and came up with some numbers and some limits and penalty fees and different things like that. We are a diverse group of members in our committee and we don't all see eye to eye, and we're kind of starting to get to a place where we're learning one another and working together and collaboratively. And I felt like our last meeting probably was our most productive meeting that we've had. And, you know, somebody might have thrown out let's say a $500 fee and somebody else said 25, and you could go back and forth and back and forth. And we finally decided, you know what, we need to pick some things to bring forward to you guys to have something for you. We are open to discussion on it. We're open to going back and making some changes, but this is just a starting place. And I think later on you guys will get the details, but this was kind of what we came to with some of those outcomes from that last meeting. So I'm available right now for any comments or questions. I appreciate your time and listening ears, and I'm done. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the update. I did watch the video today, and I thought it was an excellent meeting. Collaborative, some good ideas. I think there's, some changes we can make, but I appreciate all that the Parks and Rec has done. On a side note, Mayor Zierden and I were talking to Assistant City Administrator Eck. I personally would like to see Parks and Rec more empowered. You're highly intelligent, you're very competent, but the city charter and ordinance, the council has to provide all direction. And I was confused to that because I never did understand, they're a great group of people, they work very hard, they're passionate about what they do. Why cannot they, okay, here's the rules for this park, whatever, work it out, bring it back to the council. The continuous improvement plans, master plans. I mean, you have great ideas. So that's something I would like to see at a future date talked about. Because I think there's been a disconnect on what you're working on. I personally, I knew the event permit, but, you know, watch the meetings, you can find out, but there's not, I agree with Mayor Zierden, there seems to be some loss of communication. You know, like coming before council, there's no reason somebody should have to come before council every month. If there's a need, it's appropriate. I think it's a great idea. Love hearing from the committee members, but I don't think you should have to come every single month if there's nothing to talk about. So again, thank you, and thanks to the Park and Recs members that are present and all the other members.
Can you come to the,
Can you come to the mic?
I think what you're talking about is maybe changing us from a park committee to a park board, and that there's a difference in what you are and what, I don't know if it's allowed by the state or who it is, but I know there's a difference between a park board and a committee.
okay.
And a board has more power than a committee.
And that's something that Administrator Chansky and Assistant Administrator Eck, you know,
Yes,
they have to provide the details.
I wasn't going to say anything tonight, but she is correct. There would probably, given what you're talking about and the things you've mentioned, we would probably recommend that. I don't want to say too much, though, just because we haven't really sat and looked at it yet. And David and I are going to need to really peel through all the documentation and figure out exactly what we need to do. We know there's definitely going to need to be changes to the ordinance. I think there might need to be changes to the charter too if we're going to start paying them, but we'll need to review that and come back. David will be able to tell you exactly what those details are. We'll need to bring that back at another meeting.
And of course, you know, it's something the council has to discuss, but, you know, we need to let you, you know, do your jobs. And going forward, I think Parks and Recs is going to be a very big part of this community, and you have not had budget. You know, what do the taxpayers want? And, you know, I think there needs to be some changes and things to make your jobs easier. And of course, it takes time. So again, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Nothing? Thank you.
So if I may, with that in mind, do you as a body want me and David to sit down and review this and really start considering, you know, what would it be to, you know, empower them more, turn it into a park board, do that thing?
Yes.
Do you want us to do some of that research and come back so you guys can talk about it in November?
I would like to see that.
I would like to see it now. Does it have to be November? I don't know, but I mean, they're very competent, and I don't think the council should have to tell them every single thing that they need to talk about.
Yeah, I guess my question is just, I don't understand exactly what the powers of a park board are. I mean, I want to give you more discretion, but I think that the city council should still have like ultimate say over like what's actually getting done within the city for Parks and Rec to some extent. I mean,
Yeah,
not for
'cause
small
as-
things,
Yeah.
you know, necessarily,
Yeah,
but.
and that's a part of
As
the
a,
discussion.
as a community member, like, I understood that I'm a volunteer, and just even hearing about any sort of a pay or anything like that makes me very uncomfortable thinking of if there be long-term, conflict of interests or pressure, I don't know. There's just a lot to that. And that's not my intent either, sharing today, but, we appreciate the gesture too and wanting to support this team, so.
I think it also goes back, you know, rewatching the last park board meeting, which I was unable to attend to shed clarification on, but, you know, as a council, we directed the event permit back. Well, while the discussion started going else and outside that event permit, it was kind of held back. In my opinion, the park board should determine all rules and regulations for anything park. You know, if they want to put up a time for the beach, so do it. If they want to say we want to put a light at the fishing pier, that's on them to have that decision. Then they should have that freedom. They have that discussion at any point to discuss any parks and amenities. So.
All right.
I just want to echo some of the comments that Steve had mentioned too, and thanking you and Diane and everyone else that's on the park committee. I think those that have served in a capacity like that, volunteering your time, understand, you know, the time commitment and the responsibility and the larger community good that all of you are doing, so thank you. I'm just curious, kind of in entertaining this idea of a park board versus park committee, has the park group had any conversation along the way?
No, this is new information.
Okay.
I did get to speak with Mayor Zierden just literally an hour before our meeting tonight, and she was sharing some thoughts and stuff, and I told her just the same as I did. That wasn't my intention or anything like that. That makes me feel uncomfortable. I want to be smart with our taxpayers' money too and make most of everything. But I get too, if you're wanting us to be able to do more and make more decisions, that there might be some technicalities too. So it has not been discussed amongst our committee at all. That would be something new to bring back to our next meeting.
Has the committee discussed at all the proposed expanding of the membership?
No,
No?
we didn't. No,
Okay.
we have not.
All right, those are the only questions I had.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Megan.
you.
Thank you.
All right, we will go ahead and move on. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make that motion.
I would like further explanation on item E for resident Toff's comments. I just want an
Let's see
explanation.
if there's a second.
Okay. But then, can we discuss it, or
Yes,
does it
then
have to
it'd be
be
dis-
removed
No,
from?
it'll be a discussion after a second.
I'll second.
Okay, any other discussion? You're up.
I would like to make a motion to remove item 7E and place it on 8A.
We can discuss it now. Can you just explain that item now?
Sure, I can attempt to explain it to the best of my ability. So what this item is essentially, it's a standard update. FNC is one of our stockbroker people. They do investing and they hold some of our accounts and things like that. They send one of these to us, as I understand it, every year. We sign it and they do the stuff they do. Exactly more details than that on what they do, I'm afraid I do not know. David would need to advise on that. If you're uncomfortable approving.
So is this moving money, changing investments? What is it they do?
Well, they manage one of our stock brokerage accounts.
Sure, so in
it's-
other
it's a
words, they
standard-
buy, sell.
Yes, yeah.
We trust them to make those decisions, so it's not us actually making the decisions. I think it's like anyone that invests in stocks, you have a stockbroker, you're going to trust that they're going to make the best decisions.
Like I said, this is something that they send us every year, as I understand it, to sign and.
Just
we've
gives them the
kinda-
ability to trade in the account.
Yeah, to trade on the account and to handle our money in that area for us.
Can I ask a question? I have a comment if I may.
How about we'll wait until, let us finish this real quick.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any questions on that or discussion over it?
Well, I tend to agree with Steve. I would like to see 7E removed from the consent agenda. It seems to me like more conversation, collective understanding amongst the council on not only what's in front of us, but frankly, other city investments and where we work with different companies to make investment decisions. I've said it again, and I'll continue to say it, as this council has fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers' money, I would not feel comfortable voting on that tonight, at least not without the opportunity for more information, discussion, and again, collective understanding.
Are you still suggesting to remove it, or do you have clarification on it? Because I think that what you're kind of referring to is maybe another further discussion on our investments as a city as a whole.
Yeah,
But-
that brings up a question too. Do we ever see rates of return? Are we making money? Are we
Yeah, and
losing
I
money?
think that's a different conversation for sure.
But if we're going to approve it, it's part of the conversation, in my opinion.
Further clarification, does this need to be approved tonight?
I don't think so. I don't think it's a hot button item that needs to be approved this second. Admittedly, I could be wrong about that. But if you wanted to table it, okay, here's what I'm going to recommend. If you wanted to table it for further discussion, what I would recommend is table it tonight, approve the agenda without it on there. I will call David tomorrow, and I will, first thing in the morning, talk to him about this and go, okay, what do we need to do? If it is something that absolutely needs to be signed now, we might need to call a special meeting in order to.
Could we make a direction to move forward with it tonight, but yet have it rediscussed and redo the form if we so choose to add a secondary? I know the reason it's always kind of been brought up at every audit, it's come as a negative mark against our audit, is because we are such a small organization that we only do have the administrator, the treasurer, sign off on everything. That's all. It's been a negative mark for 9 years because we don't have a large separation of duties. We are growing. We have you now. We have Jeanette. If it's something that we could add, so I would be in favor to, if it has to be moved tonight, move it. But I want to have it rediscussed. Can we have a two-party authorization going forward? I know that was a lot.
We could just table it too.
Probably.
We can table it? Let's table it.
Yeah, we can table it, and then let's just,
Administrator Chansky here tonight to answer that.
I doubt they're gonna be like, you have to have it signed, right now.
I wouldn't think so either, but.
Yeah.
If they look at me and go, well, it should have been signed last night, I'm going to be like, okay, well,
Yeah.
why? Well, we can
Date on
table
it.
it if that's what you guys are more comfortable with.
Okay.
We will need a motion to that effect, though, specifically.
So do we need to vote? Yeah. or
motion.
Yeah, so
amend
you'll
it?
need to vote on the first motion and then,
Can we amend that motion?
or amend that motion.
Okay.
Yeah, you could amend it. If you would, Councilman
Okay.
Jensen would need to amend
So
it.
amend consent
Yeah.
agenda
So
A
I'm
through
going to
D.
amend the consent agenda
To approve
to
A
approve
through
the consent, amend the motion to approve the consent agenda with the removal of item, is it 7E?
Yes.
I will re-second that.
Any other discussion?
No.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And I'm going to invite you up. You had a comment, and you've been in this position before, so I'd like to hear. Can you come? So I'd just like to hear what your comment is.
Tom Lillahei, 7460 Fairway Drive, Fairway Drive Lane, excuse me, not used to my new address. But this is an item, as Mike has indicated, this is what we do every single year. We've done this probably for the last 20 years. And the hit that we get every audit is that we do not have enough staff to have independent two-party authorization for transfers of money. So we have done this for the last, probably good last 20 years, as long as I've been, involved with this. And this is something that we have a broker that handles our account. The city administrator is, as the clerk treasurer, he is responsible for moving of that money. It does get looked at by our annual audit. And like I said, as Mike said, it's because we are a very small city. We do not have a large enough staff to do this. It's a boilerplate item that has been done for years and years and years. And until we get to be a bigger city, so we can have a much larger staff and we can have independent financial people. Okay, we only have two right now. We have the treasurer and our financial person. That's it.
What makes us a bigger, is it a statute thing, or like what, who
We're-
decides like how big the city is before it becomes?
By our population. We're a statute city. We're not a charter city. We're a
Right,
statute
so what
city.
is you know what the population is?
It's not a trigger. It's,
Okay.
however, we could have a staff of 100 people if we wanted to afford it, okay? We're not gonna be a Bell, California.
Right.
Okay? Where they have city administrators making $1 million a year for a staff, for a city of 10,000. Okay? No, that's not a good thing to do. But until we get to a certain point where we can justify having a larger staff to manipulate our money, this is the only way we can do it. And we have done it this way since you've been city administrator.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a function of the
Yes.
number of staff that you have. I think it's how the city
It's a
council,
function of the number of staff.
well, that's where I would disagree.
Well, that's what that's what our auditors tell us. That's what they give us the
We
hit
have a
every year.
we have a relatively small financial staff currently where I work, and we have figured out a path towards absolute separation of duty and internal
You're
controls.
dealing with a totally different thing.
Okay, well, I think we're
Okay.
going to move forward
Whatever.
though, but I do appreciate
Yep,
letting us
like I
know
say-
because I was unfamiliar with this.
My
Maybe,
experience as mayor, okay, this is the way we did it. It worked well, and it's never been a problem.
maybe, thank you so much. Maybe we can get feedback from staff on like how this, like what that statute is or what that population is. I'm unfamiliar with this, so like I'm not in a position that I feel that I would know, how to move forward, so.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest with you, ma'am. We are getting way outside my area of expertise. This is all on Administrator
Right.
Jansky right here.
Right.
This is way outside my duties.
That's okay, well, we'll
So
just.
we'll definitely need to
yeah.
table it, which we've already done. I'll let him know tomorrow that we need to bring this back. He can explain the difference between charters and statute. He can explain all that stuff.
Okay.
He knows way more about
I think it would help if everyone did get to have that conversation
Sure.
and just be a little bit more educated on that so that we can make decisions.
Sure.
that
I'll let him
are
know
best.
tomorrow morning. Like I said, we'll bring it back.
Okay.
On an official motion to table site 70.
I think you already did.
Did we? Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so on new business, organizational assessment proposals. Go ahead, Assistant.
Sure. Give me 2 seconds here. Okay. So as you guys had discussed previously, through the last couple of meetings now, actually, you had mentioned you wanted to do an organizational assessment to look through how does staffing levels look, how does duty distribution look, how are we doing as a city as a whole, given staff levels, you guys, all that stuff. So we put out an RFP. We got 7 proposals back. Out of those 7, the top one that we think would be the best is Resource Management Associates. They're not the most expensive, they're not the cheapest, they're kind of in that middle ground, which is usually a decent sign. But the main thing about them, honestly, is that they were by far the most comprehensive. They set aside a specific time in October, from October 16th through October 20th, where they will be here. They're going to fly out, they're going to get a hotel, they're going to stay in the area, they're going to be here every day while we're open looking at stuff. They're going to interview all the staff. They are the only one actually that talked about interviewing the 5 of you as an actual body and getting your input on what you want to see and how things would look. And they also talked about possibly interviewing committee members and some members of the community that are key members if we had time to do that. They did by far the most research on the cities, just on the city proper. Their actual application, as you can see here, was very in tune kind of with what we were thinking. They obviously watched the meetings, is what it comes down to. They did research to know what to say and what to do and really seemed to want to come here and do stuff. But yeah, no, they were good. They had everything together. They had an actual all-inclusive fee for service with not to exceed and stuff like that. So that was our recommendation. If you guys are okay with it, we'll go with Research Management Associates, and they'll perform the organizational assessment, and we'll see where it goes from there.
All right, does anyone have any questions?
I have no questions.
Anybody?
None for me.
All right, do we have a motion then to move forward?
I'll make a motion to accept the proposal from Resource Management and Associates.
Second.
All right, any other discussion? Go ahead.
Well, I just want to make the comment that this is exactly an item that, to me, we talk about workshop meetings and the need for further discussion and understanding on how monies are being spent, especially in this case. I don't believe that we included this into the budget.
So
Maybe
yeah,
wrong on that, but
for this year, we did not include it into the budget, no. Towards the end of the memo, though, you'll see here, I won't read the whole thing. Administrator Chansky wrote a whole little paragraph here about anticipated budgets and how we're probably going to pay it out of the capital fund, and that we have some extra money in the capital fund as a result of revenues likely exceeding expenditures and things like that. So the money's there to pay for it in the budget because of some other things that didn't end up happening versus, so essentially we're trading. We're doing some things that we didn't do, we'll go to pay for this instead. That was the thought behind it there. But no, this was not, as a line item, was not budgeted for this year. This was something that you guys had brought up possibly doing.
so with that said, I would like to see this a part of a workshop meeting, so we can have more conversation as a council, looking through things, and maybe somebody can point it out if I'm just not seeing it. But one of the things that's a little concerning to me is, where are the specific deliverables, right? What are we getting from them for their proposed fee? I just think that fundamentally it's one of those things that we need to understand, we need to clarify. We need to maybe reach back out to them and specifically ask for that, and make sure that whatever they might be proposing to deliver as a result of this.
Talking about these deliverables?
What page are you on there?
I'm on page 87 in the entire packet. It's page 5 of their actual assessment, or their response.
I mean, the ultimate goal that we had discussed, and actually this was an idea that came from you, Councilman Scott, and we thought it was a good idea, and ultimately it's looking at the entire organization and that assessment, and where I'm assuming that, you know, we're gonna need staff, and, you know, where we maybe are lacking in our staff. And I mean, I think that's exactly what, you know, they're giving us exactly what we asked for, so.
Yeah, see, and that's where I would disagree. What I'm looking at on page 87 is not, in my mind, what I would consider to be deliverables.
Would you look at the scope of services, which is page 89?
Well, basically, that just outlines the various areas they're going to look into and the steps they're going to move through in the evaluation. I really don't see anything specifically that outlines what the city is getting in return. What are they providing? What are we going to tangibly be left with at the end of this evaluation?
Well, when you first made this recommendation to us to do this, what were you looking for?
Well, and that was prior to the council having committed to moving forward with a full-time planning position. So in my mind at that time that I brought this forward as an idea, it was to really take a look at current staffing levels, at current service levels, and to have an outside company come in and help us understand how we're currently situated with staffing levels, and as the community continues to grow and change over time, things like a planning position. What does that look like? What is the need?
But that is what they're providing us, though. I mean, everything that you just said is what they do, and that's what we ask them to look.
The organizational assessment includes an executive summary, the definition of city's goals and objectives for the organizational assessment, the analysis, evaluation of Breezy Point's options for services based on the combination of data, interviews, observation. I mean, it goes on to talk about what it includes. Other than seeing,
Can I grab the page for that so I can put it up?
95, bottom 95. 95 of the packet, yep. continues on, deliver the organizational assessment, final presentation. I thought it was pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, I thought it was very comprehensive, and I thought it met all of the needs of everything that you had recommended that we do.
I didn't really recommend anything specifically that we do. It was a concept and an idea that without any more discussion amongst the council, it's grown into an RFP, it's grown into now we have proposals in front of us. We have had no additional conversation whatsoever on this.
We're having it now. Which I think is kind of the point. I mean, you had a great idea, and we decided to go and see, who could come and do that for us. And now it's in front of us. We have left it into their hands to choose the best proposal. And I think from what they have told us, this sounds like a great idea. Have an outside party come in, look at our entire organization, unbiased, look at our growth, look at our goals, and then give us that entire assessment. Like I said, we thought that was a great idea, and now we are sitting here talking about it. And I just asked you.
Don't make this in any way out to be me.
No, you had a great idea. That's what I just said. It was a great idea that you had made that recommendation at the workshop. And I'm being genuine when I say that. And now we've acted on.
Genuine.
No, we've acted on that. And
Second that, Brad.
Yeah.
You asked me if we've ever done it in the last 9 years, and I looked at you and said, no, we've never. And
So then how is it that the council decided to move forward and fill a full-time planning position if this was such a great idea and so important?
timing.
I'd really like to know that.
Timing. We've talked about this as
Okay.
well. And it was because of timing. Because by the time that this happened, by the time we got these results back, we are looking, and again, we talked about this at I don't know if it was the last council meeting or 2 council meetings ago, we already discussed this, that we need someone ready to go at the start of the year because we're redoing all of our ordinances and zoning, which is a huge job. And so again, I feel like we're talking about something that we've already discussed.
So then why are we?
But I don't know, because you asked, and so I was just reiterating that we've already discussed
did I
it.
ask?
But no, like I said, I genuinely thought this was a great idea, and I'm kind of excited that we're doing this, because then moving forward, that the decisions that we're making up here is not just based on whether we want something or not, it's based on an actual data-driven consulting firm's recommendation on what they think is right for our city, and I can't think of a better unbiased way to move forward in those types of decisions. So do we have a motion, correct, in a second?
Yes.
Okay, is there any other discussion on this?
No.
Nope.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, now we will move on to the resolution for the Parks and Recs Committee. So I want to,
We've got the
do we?
council
oh.
workshops.
Oh, just
Council
kidding.
workshops, right? Okay, so real quickly, just talking to you guys about workshops again. We do currently have a workshop scheduled for October 17th at 1 p.m., just as a reminder. That was set previously at one of your last meetings. That one right now is slated to talk about Bushman Roadway and the City Hall assessment. So both of those 2 items are coming out. They're prelim design stuff, the stages we're at in those. We figure probably hour and a half for both items should be sufficient. The additional item, though, was there was conversation previously about doing another budget workshop at some point for you guys to sit down and talk about the budget again, or whatever considerations you had. We wanted to bring that back to you to see if that was still something you wanted to do. If you do want to do that, our preference for the budget workshop is that we put it on the week of November 13th. We don't have November 14th available because it's Planning Commission, but you can choose anytime, day or evening for that. It really needs to be sometime around there because November 22nd, we need to have stuff out for the budget in the Echo. So there's a little bit of a time limit there. But if you guys were comfortable with it, we would say a week of November 13th would be the time. We just wanted to get your pitch and see if that was still something you guys were interested in doing.
Do we have to decide?
I would like to have that final
Yeah.
budget meeting.
I would.
So the 14th is not available, you said?
The 14th, evening of Tuesday, November 14th, is the only time currently not available for planning and zoning
Okay, oh, I
commission.
see. Oh,
We
that's
could
right.
do it during the day, probably?
Could we schedule it that 1 o'clock time?
Yeah,
frame
I like
we've
the
been
1
doing other-
o'clock, Tuesday, 1 o'clock seems to work for,
On November 14th, Tuesday at 1 o'clock?
That's not going to work for me, nor is the 17th of October. I've mentioned before that 1 o'clock start times for me are difficult, and I just so happen to, on the 17th of October, be traveling. I'm not sure exactly when, as a council, we scheduled that October 17th workshop meeting.
I had it on my calendar.
I didn't have it on mine either, so I don't know.
I
When
was
you
at one of
guys
the-
adopted the budget calendar in June, you scheduled the workshop for the 17th at 1 PM.
Yeah, I had it on my calendar.
Is there a day, Councilman Scott, that the week of the 13th works for you for November? Since we are going to be discussing something important like the budget?
Well, again, it depends on the time that we're talking about. 1 o'clock is not a time for me that works very well.
Is there another day and time? Do you have a couple options for us?
Again, depending upon the time, the 16th would work.
What is the time frames that work for you?
After 3.
So 3 o'clock on Thursday work for you?
The 16th, November.
Does that work for everybody?
Could we push that back a little bit? I've got to do it.
2:30? Or push it back?
Push it back. 3:30 might work.
3:30? Okay,
Even better.
3:30?
3:30 is fine.
That would be
Okay.
better for me too.
All right, 3:30 on November 16th.
I may be
Okay.
late still, but I'll be close.
Okay.
Okay, so Thursday, November, you said 16th?
16th, sorry, yeah.
16th. November 16th at 3:30 PM. If it's all right, could I get that in a motion?
Make a motion to have our workshop on Thursday, November 16th at 3:30.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion on that? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, perfect.
Just a question, is there any need to try to discuss moving this one on the 17th, just in light of the fact that Brad cannot come, or changing the time? Well, I know you're not around at all that day, so I don't know,
Are you not around that week?
Councilman Scott, if you're around in that, around that time frame, or,
Yeah, just give me a minute. I have to toggle between calendars here.
and it's, you said an hour and a half for both items?
Yeah, it'll be 3 hours probably total.
Oh, 3 hours.
Now, I will say, we've already advertised it as October 17th at 1 PM, and we
Yeah.
started advertising it as that for months now, because that was set back in June. So we could probably change it, I think. I'll need to talk to David about that, though. I don't know if there's gonna need to be stuff in the newspaper and whatnot.
Can you make, oh, you're not here, like, you're not in the state, correct, that day, or?
No, I'll be in state. I'll just be several hours from the area.
Okay.
Would remote work or your,
Call in.
or Teams?
Not at 1. I mean, if it's already been noticed, I'm assuming it's going to be difficult to reschedule it, so the council may just want to move forward and hold it.
That would be our recommendation as staff at this point, just because it's out there and everybody
Okay.
already knows it.
Okay. All right, that's what we'll do then. All right, now moving on. So a lot of these new ideas for the Parks and Rec Committee are really stemming from what we've experienced the last 9 months coming into this role. I think too, some of the things that have been said specifically about us not having empathy. I mean, these are public comments that have been made about us as a council. And I think even looking back on, you know, some of the things that happened prior to this council taking over this year, you know, there's a lot that we need to do. There's a lot that we need to implement. There's a lot of changes that we are trying to make. We're trying to improve processes. We're trying to get more people involved. And like, you know, Megan had mentioned, you know, typically we see that it is tough to get people to participate, but we've actually seen somewhat of the opposite this year. We've gotten more people who are more passionate about, you know, Breezy Point, and they're wanting to get involved. And I think one of the issues majorly is the disc golf course, and there are people who are experiencing certain issues, and I've always stated from the beginning that we would address those issues. It's hard to address issues that haven't happened yet, that we would continue to address issues when they arise. We would continue to talk about things as they come on. I think that it's important that when we are looking at something like the comprehensive plan that you guys are working on, your master plan that you're working on, when we're looking at the fact that we have, you know, the feasibility for the trail, or we have the, you know, garden that they've been working on, and more residents are coming forward, and, you know, what we don't have, you know, sidewalks, and we don't have these things. And so this is really the start of us building something that maybe we haven't necessarily had before. And I know that, you know, not just the fact of adding members for the sake of adding members. I think that there are perspectives in our community that when they come together, they can find solutions to different problems that, you know, they experience. And, you know, in my resolution, one of the things was making the recommendation for Tracy Curtin to join. She's already said that she would like to. It's something that she actually did consider back in January, but she was getting her bachelor's and finishing that. I think she does have a perspective that maybe, you know, nobody else may have. And I think, again, I think at the root of democracy, empowering people, especially people who do want to be involved and make a difference, sometimes this is the best way to do that. And so that really is my, you know, the reasoning for looking at this expansion. It doesn't have to be permanent. It's not something that we have to say that 9 people forever is going to make up the Park and Rec committee. But I think as you guys are working on this, I mean, you guys are creating that master plan, and, you know, looking 1, 2, 3 years down the way, I don't want it to come back and it be something that council was supposed to do, but yet we want to give the autonomy to the committee. We want you guys to have the authority to have those conversations in your meetings. We don't want to have to approve every little thing. And personally, I wish I can say, I mean, I would love for us to be like, you know what, anything up to $1,000, you don't need council approval on. Make the decision, right? If you want to put silencers on the baskets, if you, whatever that is, at a certain dollar amount, I don't feel like council needs to necessarily be involved at every single aspect of what you guys are doing. Dream big, and that's exactly what was in her presentation. And I don't think we're going to give you guys really the ability to do that unless we give you a different way to do it than what's already been done. And so that is, you know, my reasoning for it. And like I said, I mean, there are issues with the disc golf course. We have all winter to find some solutions. One of the things I know that Steve and I have talked about is patrol, right? We want to know that on days when we have, you know, tournaments, we're going to have patrol, right? I mean, these are all things we want to iron out. And I just feel that Tracy Curtin would make bring a good perspective to work through winter, to iron out and look at all of the different situations that we're facing, so that we can come into spring and be ready for whatever it is that's going to come in spring. So that's why I brought this to you guys, and I want to have that conversation with you. I mean, I think at this point I don't feel like it's going to hurt us in any way. I think if anything, it's just going to help bring more perspectives, so that it's not all coming from us. So that's where I'm at with that.
I guess I'm okay with trying it. I think getting more resident input is not a bad thing, different perspectives. I just hope that the discussion is not continually about the disc golf course. I think when we get to the permit, we need to find common ground and compromise. And I've got a lot to say about the permit, but Bill Toff's statement in the meeting that you can't find parks like this anywhere that are in the middle of residence. And we kind of got to work together and figure it out, but that part is the conversation for, the event permit. But I don't see any reason why we can't add to.
Earlier, Councilman Scott, you asked a question of Megan, and that was whether, they had discussions on expanding the membership at all, and she said no. I guess in my mind, it makes sense to send it back to the Parks and Rec to have that discussion first, is to one, see if that's something that they think is needed. I don't necessarily think more people makes it better, especially in committees. Sometimes it makes things more difficult and doesn't necessarily help. And I also have some concerns about having applications received already and then appointing somebody else. So like Jonathan or, Mr. Bakken already have applications in, and then we're appointing somebody else. So that's my thoughts on it.
My first thought when I read the first bullet point was from 7 to 9 was too many cooks in the kitchen sometimes is not always the good thing. But then I saw it was Tracy Curtin as being the recommendation. When I did meet with them, both at their house and for coffee regarding the disc golf course, I made a comment to them that I think they're a great asset to the community. I think that they should stay involved into the community. So I'm really excited that she's also included herself with this. I know that the disc golf is something important for the Curtins to get addressed and to resolute. So I don't know if that can be like an ex officio and have a specific 1 to 2, 3 workshops that the parks can have to talk nothing but the disc golf and getting those things, concerns, and addressed and pointed out and brought back or enacted if they're park board. But at this point, to go 7 to 9 without even the park board committee, I wasn't really fully supportive going to 9.
Yeah, I would echo what Mike and Rebecca have said. I actually had park committee members reach out and just express their disapproval of expanding it to 9, kind of along the lines of what Diane had mentioned early on. As I recall, council increased it from 5 to 7.
Yeah, it was.
This year.
I think there's something to be said about looking at the surrounding communities and how they're operating their parks and rec board too. And I think going to 9 without at least the park members themselves having discussions and giving the council a recommendation seems to be out of line with when you look at Nisswa and Cross Lake and some of the other communities, a number of members that they have on their park and rec. I think there's always ways to get public participation and feedback without necessarily expanding the membership. So yeah, I at the very least would like to see it go to the Park and Rec Committee for discussion and a recommendation.
Well, and I think, again, if you go back to my reasoning, it's, okay, so where are comments and concerns going to go then? If they're coming directly to us, it doesn't, the communication is completely lost in how we're solving some of these issues. I would like to see it at least so that the Park and Rec Committee, they handle everything disc golf related. It doesn't come to us first. It comes to them so they can work through the issues. So if, someone who lives on the course has an issue, we need the proper channels to be able to go and solve some of these. Just sending council an email is not, in my opinion, the best way to really get your voice heard and to start the process of solving the issues. So if and I'm completely okay with sending it back to Park and Rec for their consideration. I mean, again, I only really thought of this last week. I wanted to put it on the agenda. I wanted us to talk about it. If we want to send it back to Park and Rec and let them further that discussion, that's totally fine. But I think what it comes down to for me is we need better process, better communication. We need autonomy for the park board. We need them to be able to make decisions. We need them to be able to come up with rules. We need them to be able to handle issues that our residents are facing and be able to go from there. It can't just come to us in the form of an email first, and then it just dies, I feel like, at that point, because, there's just not the proper channel. So that's my reasoning behind it, but I am 100% on board with letting Park and Rec Committee talk about it at their next meeting.
The reason why the council is getting emails is a certain number of community members have been asking for issues related to the disc golf course to be on the council agenda, to address them with the council as the group that makes those decisions.
And I don't think it should come to council. I think it should go through Park and
Those
Rec
requests
first.
have not been honored, so people have no other recourse but then to send emails to the council, which to me I find extremely frustrating. This should be a group of elected officials that hear from residents whatever the issue is and figure out the solutions. It shouldn't be about, well, let's just, what kind of feels to me, pass the buck onto the Park and Rec Committee to address the issues and to deal with the problems. That's not the Park and Rec's role. That's not their responsibility. And so I'm just going to say it. I mean, it feels to me like this is an attempt to take the issues related to the disc golf course and to move them away from the council.
Well, they're coming
very
up with the
rude.
rules. They're coming up with the rules. They're coming up with the master plan. The disc golf course was started under Park and Rec. So it needs to be a part of the discussion that they're having right now.
That is so not true.
Okay.
And inaccurate, and you know it.
That's fine. I mean,
Yeah.
you and I can disagree on that. All I'm saying is that, again, the processes need to be there, and Park and Rec need to have the authority to make decisions. They're coming up with rules, signage, master plan. It needs to go through them so they can help us find solutions. Us just sitting up here is not necessarily the best way that we've been able to find solutions. It's more the workshops where we've been able to find solutions because we can sit and talk about these issues. So just putting it on the agenda has not worked for us. It's not been the best way to find.
Opportunity.
There's been plenty of opportunity to talk about this.
Since the council approved the expansion of the disc golf course, there been an agenda item specifically taking up, listening to, and understanding the issues at hand. It has not happened.
Well,
So to sit here and to tell me and others that it has is not true.
I'm just saying this is not the first place it should start. When someone comes to us with a problem, the first place it should not start is just for us to put it on the agenda. Like, I don't feel like that is
Why
the
not?
best, because I don't feel like that's the best way to solve some of these issues. I don't.
You don't think that's the best way when the council was the one to approve moving the expansion of the disc golf course
Expansion
forward?
was already done.
Oh, it
Okay,
was.
when we came in, it was 95% done. We're not rehashing this again. So I'm going to go back to the fact that I, again, brought this resolution. Here was my reasoning why. You can disagree with it, whatever you, it doesn't matter, right? The fact is that the goal is that we solve some of these problems. That's the goal. However we get there, I don't really care how we get there, but I'm throwing out ideas so that we can figure out ways to do that, so we can work with our residents, and our residents feel like their efforts are getting turned into solutions, okay? Because it's not happened. I understand that, but we need to find a better process. So this is my way of suggesting a better process, and that's fine. We can send it back, Parks and Rec can talk about it, and then we can hear what they have to say about it. But again, at least I'm coming up with ideas, right? Ideas on how to do this and make it better. That's the goal. Like, that's why we were elected.
Well, and you should be the one to come up with ideas, considering that you and others were behind the very decision that's now created a litany of issues.
I'm not even gonna go back to that, okay?
Well,
I brought
it's the
the
reality.
resolution, that's fine. I'm done talking about that part of it, okay? I brought the resolution. If you guys want to go ahead and send it back to Park and Rec for them to discuss, we can do that. I'm totally fine with that. Again, I'm trying to throw out ideas. I'm trying to get more residents involved. I'm trying to show that, listen, like, we do want to solve some of these problems when they arise. That's it.
I'll make a recommendation to pass back to the Parks and Board to discuss, to grow the committee from 7 to 9 committee members.
Yeah, and I think part of that would be, if there are.
Do you have a second?
Sorry.
Second?
I guess it's a recommendation, not a
Second.
motion.
I actually was going to ask for a motion on this
That's a
one.
motion. Motion to fill.
Sorry, I didn't know the motion.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, and any other discussion?
So just to clarify, motion to refer the expansion of the Park and Rec membership from 7 to 9 to the Park Committee for further discussion and a recommendation?
That would be my motion, yes.
Correct.
Do you have any other discussion on it? I know you and I had kind of talked on it.
No, we'll send it back.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. All right. We will move on to the disc golf course event permit.
Can we get our 5-minute break?
Yes. All right, we will take a quick 5-minute break.
No, leave it.
All right, we will go ahead and continue. Moving on to the disc golf event permit.
Okie dokie. So you guys had previously on September 14th mentioned that you wanted to send it back to Parks and Rec so that they could review some of the changes, maybe recommend some things, make some alterations themselves, do those kinds of things. Just get their general thoughts on it. Obviously, the video's up online. We had that there. We had them consider 5 topics as based upon your guys' direction, which were enforcement requirements, public use permissibility during events, costs associated with reservations charges, possible equipment expansions or course coverage, and then tournaments associated rules and participation limits. Based on that stuff, they brought back this revised event permit here. Now, I've highlighted all the stuff that they wanted added and changed and kind of tweaked. So I'll run you through it quick. They settled on a permitting amount of $100 per course per day due upon submission of this application alongside a $300 refundable damage deposit pending inspection. Now, they had also recommended that we look into doing a $500, like if somebody violates the rules or regulations or they cause a problem or whatever, they had recommended we do like a $500 penalty and we ban them from the course use for a year. Upon talking about that with Administrator Chansky and kind of tossing it back and forth a little bit, trying to enforce that legally would be very difficult unless we're willing to sue them. We wouldn't recommend that simply because you're spend more than $500 if you try to go after them for legal fees and everything. Just, it doesn't make sense. What we can do though is we can tell them, hey, if you're found in violation of those rules, we're going to hold on to your damage deposit. So that's why that $300 is still there, and we're recommending at this point that kind of shift towards saying, okay, if they're found in violation and we can prove it and there's problems and all those things, they'll be banned from the course for a year, and we will withhold that $300 refundable damage deposit. They also talked about the length of it, so limited to 2 consecutive days. It does reserve the park area for sole use right now. That was what they thought they were okay with. That's for the applying organization or individual. Events have to be held between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. CST, so it's only during those sort of light hours of the day. Course events are limited to 1 per month on any days between May 15th and September 30th of the calendar year. Obviously, they have to acquire the permit, but they also talked about persons. So what they settled on was events are required to obtain a permit if the number of participants exceed 40 persons, with the maximum allowable number of participants for any individual event being 180 persons. So if they're below 40 persons, they don't need a permit. If they're above 180 persons, it's a hard no stop. We would say, no, you can't hold the event. Obviously, you know, you guys as the city council reserve the right to deny it or do anything with the permit or blah, blah, blah. We also, staff put in a recommendation here that it needs to be submitted no less than 2 weeks in advance of the regular council meeting at which it would be considered. So like if it was an event at the end of like November, we need it to be submitted 2 weeks before the November council meeting agenda so that we can actually get it on the agenda, get it to you guys, and have you review it and approve it or say yes or no. If they don't get it us within that 2 week time, our preference as staff is a hard no, because we just don't have the time to process it and review it and do all the things that need to be done, take the money, and then give you guys time to read it and get it out there. Most of the actual meat and potatoes here, they were okay with the parking, the food and beverages, all this kind of details here. They did add a section saying that they have to actually provide documentation certifying proof of insurance with this application. So we hadn't had that in before. Now we're saying, okay, when you do this event, instead of just certifying here that you have the insurance company, I need you to give me the actual document. Makes sense. I didn't see any issue with that. Additionally, they wanted us to add under the application certifications and waivers here, language on us not permitting the use of alcohol, tobacco, or cannabis products on public property at the event. So here they have, you know, I hereby certify no alcohol permitted at the event. They have to initial, same for cannabis, same for tobacco. So they have to initial all of those. And then they also have to initial and acknowledge that they certify violations of the permit will result in forfeiture of damage deposit and ban from use of both city-owned disc golf courses for a period no less than 1 calendar year. And that was the list of changes that they wanted tossed in there.
All right, thank you. All right, initial discussions.
Watching the video, I thought that was discussed thoroughly. I thought they addressed each point. I think it addressed the points of concerns that we had wanted them to bring back, and I think it looks good.
I think it was a good discussion, but there needs to be more done. To Mayor Zierden's point about wanting additional Parks and Recs members to address issues, different perspectives, the city, in my opinion, still hasn't dealt with the property owners. These are unique parks. They are sitting right in the middle of residential neighborhoods. I think Tracy Curtin brought up a good point. The original 18 holes, there's not as many residents abutting it, but they can't see the disc golf course players, but they can hear them. The expansion is both. They can see them, they can hear them, and we don't know as a city what the traffic is going to be. Is it going to be massive amounts of just the public, which this course was built for the public and residents? What's the usage going to be? So now, if you take and allow tournaments, 36 holes for 2 days, I don't think the amount of tournaments is appropriate. I think police patrol has to happen. It's part of the condition of having a tournament. And as far as cost of having the police, I think the event organizers should be responsible for part of that. And then we need to solve the issues. Okay, what's going to happen? Yes, Mayor Zierden is right. We can't fix something that isn't broken, but there's already been police reports. There's already been incidents. This hasn't been used that much. So how do we find the balance between the residents that abut the properties and I don't think we should ever shut down the course to the public. If there's going to be a tournament, it's on one course or the other so that there's always 18 holes available to the public. I think there's many more questions that need answers, and I don't think it's appropriate to vote on it myself. Enforcement is another thing. How do you enforce? You know, we could have signage everywhere. Ordinances and rules are words on paper. If the police aren't there at that time, they can't do anything. Let's not kid ourselves. People are going to smoke on the course. They're going to drink on the course. There has to be an officer there to do it. It's not fair to put residents as the enforcers. What are they going to do? A video? A recording?
Steve, a question for you on that one, which I'm in support of. The question that kind of goes through my mind, is it an officer there for the whole time? Kind of goes back to speeding. The speed limit is posted and somebody speeds without an officer there, it's still a violation.
Yep.
But you can't police it 24/7.
No, you can't, and I'm not expecting that.
And that's what I'm asking. Like, you have great ideas, and I know that there are some event permits that you have to like hire an off-duty officer to be able to do. Is that in 1 or 2 hours they randomly
I say
show
the
up?
duration of the tournament and the at least half, if not all, should go to the event organizers. it needs, because residents, how do you enforce any of that? You can't. And you know, during the week, there's going to be a lot of other times. Enforcement is incredibly difficult.
So that's where I had brought this up, Chief Sandell, at our workshop. You know, one of the things like that we had discussed is the side-by-side, right? And how, in general, Breezy Point on the weekends, we grow significantly. And we've had other issues, not just the disc golf course. There's issues with the brush pile, speeding, golf carts. I mean, it's, you know, it's a good time on the weekend and people up are having a good time. But I think that I've heard from multiple residents on just different issues that, you know, that lack of presence, you know, so having that, not, I hate the word mandatory, but just knowing that on a Saturday and Sunday during busy season, May to, you know, September, that there is going to be an officer on the side-by-side checking out everything, right, for a couple hours a day, right? It's not that we would need the 24-hour. It's, I feel like if you know that a police officer is riding around on a side-by-side and they're going to come and check the disc golf course a couple times a day, it's going to deter people from doing those things because they know that that presence is there. It may not be there at that specific time right when they start doing it, but it could be in 10 minutes, it could be in 30 minutes. So I think that that is a good place to start, is to just the residents know that that presence is there, knowing that they're not going to catch everything, but it is going to, I think, deter people. So just getting that plan potentially with you at the start of the year on how we can do that and what's best for the city, I think is going to be the critical part of it.
Correct. So we budgeted some overtime rate for officers to patrol, specifically Saturdays and Sundays when it's going to be busier. With that said, this also means we need to get the side-by-side with the HVAC because of the terrain out there. Hot summer weekends, walking up and down that in a full uniform and a vest and stuff is not going to be conducive to anyone. And then obviously the availability. We have things that come up where sometimes we could be shorthanded. My goal would be to get out there and be visible as much as possible. The visibility, at least for our recurring people that are coming to the course, being out there and being visible will help, I think, eliminate some of the smaller stuff. That doesn't work, obviously, if you have people coming up just for one weekend a year. They may not see us, but the goal is to be visible.
Correct. Yeah. And I think that's just a part of the plan, right? The part of, like, again, why we're trying to get ideas going and, you know, people together just to really come up with, like, more ways that we can, like, curb some of this
But there's
stuff.
also concerns. I mean, okay, you have the tournament. We all know what a tournament is. I don't think 180, I think is too many for a tournament. I think it should be less. But to the point, residents said there was events held for the weekend of in September, which would have been the 14th, 16th and 17th. I was out of state then. They canceled them. The Bemidji Disc Golf canceled them, but yet they had an event. I've seen posts on social media where there's invite only, sponsored by Pequot Lakes Dairy Queen. How many people is that? Are there other league play? How many people play in leagues? That information has never, ever been provided to council. So
I think in the meeting, they said it was like 25 in the Parks and Rec.
who verified it though? I mean, where did that information come from? Did staff reach out to the local clubs? I guess I don't know the answer to this.
I know Shane did a presentation to
Reached out to Shane
P&Z.
and asked him, I think was the, do you remember, Bill, in the meeting? That discussion?
well, I'll comment.
On the
So-
28 or 25, I think she
I
said.
can tell you, I've driven by there 2 months every Sunday morning, and there's 8 to 10 cars. That's all.
So to reiterate, Mr. Taft, just so it's on, like, you, every Sunday morning for the last couple of months,
For 2
8,
months, July and August, I'll get up there somebody here.
Sorry.
Well, in August, I drove by and counted the cars. There were usually 7 to 8 cars and 1 golf cart, usually an orange-colored golf cart. I don't know how many people that represents, but that's how many cars I counted. And the tournament, they did host that tournament on the 16th, and they called it an event to get around the tournament language of not being able to hold a tournament.
What a joke. I couldn't agree more with everything that Steve has said. Again, appreciate Park and Rec Committee as a group, having more discussions about this, advancing changes to the permit as they have. I really don't see how the council should be taking up any action on issuing an event permit when there's clearly one issue after another that needs to be really addressed specifically. You know, as a city council, we can't even sit here and say, who is responsible for the oversight and management of that disc golf area? You know, to me, enforcement is still not appropriately figured out. I think Steve is getting close to this idea of, as events go, the event organizers really ought to be the ones responsible for providing a level of police involvement, security, I guess however you want to frame that. I don't really see how, as much as I appreciate the chief and the officers' willingness to, you know, patrol that area, it really gets to the taxpayers in this community shouldering that cost for a very niche use of land, and I just don't really see how that's appropriate. I think a permit in that way should be required regardless of the size of the event or tournament, however you're referring it to. I don't know what's important or magical around 40 people, and then it triggers it, but less than that, it doesn't. That just feels out of alignment to me. Probably a lesser concern, but you know, this idea of events going up to 8 o'clock in the evening, to me, I think poses a little bit problematic as well. I mean, as we continue to move through the summer months and into the fall, we lose quite a bit of daylight. We're really going to have folks out there when it's still, I guess, reasonably light out to see what's going on, but at a point in time where we've got multiple residents that abut this area that have small kids, and I don't know about anyone else, but I think of things like bedtime and how is noise and activity in their backyard going to affect, you know, things in their life. I really feel that there needs to be quite a bit more looking into exactly how are these events going to be managed, who's responsible for what, or the council would pass approval of an event permit.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that, you know, we don't need to vote on this right now. I mean, I definitely think that there are some other things that we should address. I do think, though, that we've already budgeted $4,000 in overtime for our department. So the patrol is not just going to be for the disc golf course. It's going to be for Breezy Point residents in general. So I do think that, again, we need that in place, disc golf course or not, because, again, it's for the residents and the visibility. But I agree. There's still a bunch of things that are not addressed, like on here. I mean, I think we don't have to decide these things overnight on this specifically. We're going into winter. We have some time again, which is why.
I would agree to that. And I specifically asked Administrator Chansky, or told him I don't think this should have been on the agenda. I think Madam Chair Zierden's presentation was appropriate. There's too many unanswered questions, and we need to work through it, because if we don't, it's going to come back month after month after month. We need to take into consideration the property owners that abut those courses, and that means the original 18 too. There has to be compromise, though. I mean, there's going to be a couple tournaments. I don't think one a month is appropriate, but that's something we need to talk through. I don't think tonight's the night to do it, but there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. Course traffic will figure out, this thing hasn't even been used, really. So let's work through it, try to find compromise. And again, thanks to Park and Rec. I thought it was a good meeting, but we need to get it figured out. Like, also I had asked that wasn't to Parks and Rec. The Disc Golf Club made a lot of promises to residents. Silencers being one. That never happened. They also made the promises of, some type of blocking of the tee pads. That never happened. And maybe the residents on those holes don't want it. And the trees, well, we addressed the trees. Number one, you couldn't get them in there. Who's going to water them? So the city needs to address that too. Are silencers the answer? No. Would they help? If I was sitting on my deck, I wouldn't want to listen to chains rattling for 2 days straight for 8 to 10 hours. What's the happy medium?
I think, can I say something? I did listen to the Parks and Rec meeting, and I do really appreciate all the time that was spent by those individuals answering the questions that we told them to go back and look at and answer for us. I think the meeting was like 2 some hours. I mean, not all of it was this, but a lot of it was. And I think that the majority of the things that they came up with are good, and I agree with the conditions on them. I agree there's no urgent reason to pass this. I mean, I would note that we still have discretion to not approve any permit that does come through. So at some point, we will need to work through those issues. And I don't know if that's a workshop or if we're saying it's going to Parks and Rec to discuss these issues and then bring them back to us for what the resolutions are. And I don't know you said law enforcement, which we kind of discussed, has been already discussed for how to resolve some of those issues. So I'm fine with not approving it. I do think that they did a good job and placed some good restrictions on this. Like, with the 8 to 8, they talked about saying sunset, but they said that changes all the time. So pick an actual time. So like to your, comment, Councilman Scott, about like, oh, it's going to be dark out. I don't think the intent of the Parks and Rec was to let them play like when it gets dark. I think it was like, we have to pick a time, and we're not going to say like it's 8 in July and, 7:30 in September. It was 8 to 8. There was some discussion on limiting it to, the people that rent the space, and, the Parks and Rec, it came to the conclusion that that was fine to limit it just the people that, paid for that event.
I mean, I'm fine with that too, but not 36 holes you shouldn't be excluding the taxpayers in public. There's the compromise. The tournament can go on, people can use it.
I mean, I think once a month, to me, that's not, overly intrusive to residents.
I guess I would disagree.
No, and that's fine, and that's what this is for. It's just, I'm trying to sort of comment back on what some of you have said, which I know is done, so.
But I think the council
You can table
needs,
it, it's just that.
we need to put some timelines on it though too. I mean, do we start in January? Is it a workshop? Does it have to be cited by April? I don't think it can be open-ended.
Who's having the discussion?
Well, and that's the other thing too, and that was why I suggested that we bring in 2 more people. If Park and Rec can really sit down, and we've experienced how amazing workshops are, right? Like, how do we sit down, we discuss everything, we know that we're going to be there for 3 hours, whatever the case is. If Park and Rec are able to do that and bring in, again, a diverse population of people to really go through the details, the nitty-gritty of this stuff, I think that's going to be the best way to start really putting this together and make it a comprehensive.
I think first it would be helpful if we had a discussion on it with us as
Yeah.
to like what are like our expectations for what we want?
Yeah, we can have a workshop on this
Then we
specifically.
can say like Parks and Rec, consider these things and see.
One of the things I was going to throw out there is we've talked a lot about switching to a park board and enabling them to make decisions and to do things. What if we, in this instance, we gave the park board full authorization. We expect a minimum of 2 open house, not workshop, because I want to say open house to get resident feedback. We request that they have at least 2 of those workshops, and we have something back in front of us by March.
Yeah, I would love that. That's where I wanted to go with that. Like,
fine.
I want. That's where I wanted to go with it. It just like I didn't realize that there was a park board, a difference between a park board and a park and rec committee. But it wasn't that I wanted to pawn this off. It was that I think that that is the best way to do it because that's what they're here for. They're on this board. I want to give them that authority. Yes, we will make the ultimate decision on a lot of these things, but like, let them have these workshops and talk through these things and be a part of it. So it's not just, oh, the council's making the decision. Like, I don't feel like that's in the best interest of the residents, that the council is the only one responsible for just talking about it and working through the problems when they should also be a part of that. So I 100% love that idea. I think that that is what I would rather do more than anything.
I don't disagree, but I know we do need to give them some guidance because otherwise, if they bring something back and it doesn't satisfy like Councilman Jensen's needs, then it's just.
That's where we, as individuals, show up to the workshop or to the hearing and voice our opinions.
Oh, I like that idea.
We're open to attend those.
But what about the quorum?
We'll post it that a full council can potentially be in.
I actually really like that idea.
I'm fine with that as long as we're not violating open meeting laws.
We give them the freedom to do so.
But don't we want consensus on what this group, instead of just.
I'll go back. Do we want to have a park board and let them start making decisions, or do we still want to be the final decision makers?
Well, I think personally, I still want to be the final decision maker. I want to give the Parks Board more discretion, but I don't.
And I guess we don't understand the park board makeup yet though either. So we don't really know like where does that all fall in. So I feel like before we talk about that part of it, let's figure out what that means, right? And maybe then go from there. But I like the idea. I mean, I feel like, I don't know, I feel like that is a better way to move forward with this. And if it doesn't work, then we get rid of the park board and go back to a committee. I mean, we have to try something new. Obviously, what has been done hasn't worked well, so we can't continue to just keep doing the exact same things over and over again. So I'm in favor of doing something different and just seeing where that goes.
Well, and it meets the needs of the resident. I don't know what the answer is, but I do agree whatever's been done isn't working. And it's going to continue and continue. There needs to be some type of closure. There needs to be compromise. And how do we get there?
I think it starts with the council truly listening to the concerns that residents are wanting to express and bring forward that they're not being provided an opportunity to do. I mean, I think at the end of the day, that's really the crux of the issue, and I wholeheartedly disagree sending this back to the Park and Rec Committee. I can only imagine myself as a member on that committee feeling like, okay, here we go again. The council is once again lobbing the ball into our court when that's not really where it belongs. I mean, yes, they have a role and, it's an invaluable group of people to further park and rec opportunities, but the issues at hand with this disc golf course were created by the decisions that this council made. Whether you agree with that or not.
So Brad.
There's no denying that.
Okay, so say the council owns it. So are we gonna go through public hearings once again, the same things get said? What can we do different? I mean.
I think where it starts is actually listening to the concerns that people have and being serious about finding compromise. There has been nothing at all resembling compromise that's taken place so far.
I would agree with that. I
Nothing.
mean,
And yet, meeting after meeting, in particular, the mayor has voiced it to be a goal of hers to do that very thing, to compromise. And residents have brought forward ideas and suggestions how to make things better.
I mean, I personally,
falling on
I've
deaf
like
ears.
listened and I've seen the emails that have come through, like I've seen them. I was at the city council meetings, I listened to the people come up and talk. I heard the people, I'm not, I mean,
To say we're not listening is,
I just
I mean-
personally, I am listening. That doesn't mean I'm gonna make a decision.
I don't have all the answers though. That's the thing. I don't,
Some of the holes, I mean,
I don't know what to do on some of these things. I don't. And as one person, we shouldn't be responsible for solving all of the issues. You certainly haven't come with some solutions. All your solutions are no, 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 no.
Exactly, because this whole thing
So then we
went off
shouldn't,
the
it's not
rails
working, it's not
when there was
working.
no plan.
Yeah, we're trying to
Or it's-
implement that.
You can't do something in any community that affects people to the magnitude that this does, whether directly or indirectly, and not have a plan.
Okay, start bringing us an actual plan with some actual
That
solutions.
is not my responsibility at this point.
What, you literally just said you want,
That ship has sailed when the council voted to approve and put into place and move forward the expansion of the disc golf course.
so now it's not your responsibility. You've wiped your head.
Throw this back on my lap.
Okay,
Don't you even dare.
Okay, well, bring us some solutions, because that's what I'm trying to sit up here and do, okay? That's what I expect all of us to do, right? I would like it if you would bring some. That would be really nice for you to put something on the, ask to put
Brought
something
forward
on the
so many
agenda.
ideas, and you could say solutions in fact before this council decided to move forward.
Okay, we are trying to
Or
move
overlooked,
forward.
ignored, and not taken seriously, apparently.
And that's your opinion, but like honestly,
Absolutely, it's my opinion.
bring some solutions instead of just sitting over there and saying no all the time. That would be nice. I would love some solutions.
You're asking me to figure out how we address the mess that's been made by the council when I consistently voted against that.
No, I'm asking you to bring some solutions for some of the things they are
so
facing right
inappropriate.
now. No, I'm asking you to bring
That's so
some
inappropriate.
solutions. Okay, that's fine. I mean, I'm not going to continue to argue with you on it. So we can go ahead and,
Crazy.
who wants to have a motion to,
My quick question, and that's just honest question, Brad, Mr. Scott. If you're not to bring the solutions, you're a member of the council, correct?
Yes, I am.
If you don't bring solutions, why should anybody else?
Mike, I'm going to reiterate it again, and I'm not going to mention it again. I brought forward ideas, the equivalent of solutions, early on in the conversation. I think everyone recognizes and understands the things that I was bringing up and raising as questions and suggesting, why don't we take a few steps back and do something like actually develop a plan as to what the city is doing, why, who's doing what, any number of things. Where did that go? Do we have a plan? No, we don't. So, I brought forward ideas, I shared my thoughts early and often. And clearly the council decided to do something different that I frankly don't know what to do with at this point. So to sit there, Madam Mayor, and to suggest that I be part of the solution, totally inappropriate, Ms.
well,
Blaze.
you're not serving your residents then. You really aren't, because.
Oh, I most certainly am, and you don't have
That's
to tell me
okay.
that
That's
I'm
okay.
not.
If you don't want to, then you know what, then
Sit there and
don't.
be arrogant like you
I'm not.
are.
I'm trying to bring
We can
solutions.
We can move forward. This
Yes.
isn't conductive.
Yes, so that's all right. So we can go ahead and make a motion then to table this.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, on to
Okay. Sure.
cannabis.
So, proposed cannabis use ordinance. Okay, so you guys have talked about this already. As you know, we came forward with some options and whatnot and eventually settled on kind of copying the county's ordinance and replicating what they were doing and then doing it here in the city of Breezy Point. You considered it last meeting, you had public hearings, so all the boxes are checked. But you wanted to wait until we recommended you wait until the county is actually done with theirs. They have finished theirs now and they didn't change anything, at least as far as I know. Is that correct, Chief Sandell, to your understanding?
To my knowledge, it's the same.
Same? Okay. So that's good news. Because it's the same and you already held a public hearing, you don't need to hold another one and you're good to go. So if you want to approve the cannabis ordinance, same one that you were talking about last week, you guys can go ahead and vote on it and approve it, or you can discuss it more, or you can do anything you like.
I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance 2023-03, which is in line with the county's ordinance.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, staff reports. What do you have for us?
Let me see here real quick. At this time, I don't have anything for staff reports, so we can move on to council reports if you guys want to say anything.
Got anything for P&Z?
I wasn't there. I was in Pennsylvania. I'm sure there was a variance and a cup.
I would agree with that, probably, most likely. Anybody
But no,
else?
I did not attend. I was,
Okay. Anybody else? All right.
I think I was just going to mention, I don't know if Daniel, if you're going to bring it up, or I can just bring it up. Just to see if there was consensus on this one item. When I was listening to the Parks and Rec meeting, there was a woman who commented that if it was possible to look into like adding another step into the water when you're at the public beach. Like she said, for like elderly people or older people, like the last step is still relatively high. So I don't know if it's feasible or not, but if maybe Parks and Rec could look into it and we could just direct them to do that, I think it would be nice to just see if it's possible.
Yeah.
And Joe, you might be able to answer off the top of your head. If not, maybe it'd be nice just to look into it, but.
That's how they come. There's no extra steps.
Okay.
That's the commercial version. I believe we got them from Nisswa Dock. I can check into if, they can customize it because the legs are adjustable due to, for example, water height. Years when the water's higher, it doesn't seem so big, that sort of thing. But I can look into it. I mean, it won't hurt anything.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you for bringing that up. All right, agenda forecast. What do you have for us on so far?
Sure. Agenda forecast. So, sorry, just got to bring it up here. Okay, so this is the memo that Administrator Chansky put together. As you can see here, there's a couple items that he wanted brought for that were scheduled for the next agenda. The presentation on community garden as requested by the mayor, discussion on disc golf courses, disc golf cart rules, or I'm sorry, discussion on golf cart rules. I am on, so golf carts as in the ones you drive around the town. I apologize. That was requested by Councilman Jensen. We also, as staff, are bringing forward a couple items. We want to talk about the short-term rental well testing again. There's some difficulties with that we wanted to bring you. Some discussions on amending the finance policy that we're going to bring forward. Obviously, the ordinance prohibiting tobacco use on public properties is coming before you guys. That was one that was requested by Parks and Recs, and you guys had told us to bring back. And then the joint powers agreement between the city of Breezy Point and Pequot Lakes for the ladder truck. In the interest of not stepping on Administrator Chansky's toes anymore, I'm going to leave it at that because I'm sure I've already messed up tonight and he's going to have to come in here and correct all my mistakes.
Okay.
So, the memo's there if people want to read it. I recommend you go through it.
Okay, and I just want to make a clarification. So regarding the garden, the reason that I would like to hear the report is because they did work on it earlier this year, and I know that it was talked about that they weren't going to make a decision on it. It wasn't until like the master plan was done, but because they worked on it, I do want to hear about it. So I know there was a packet, but I think that it would be nice just to have, you know, let us know what you worked on and like where you see it going, and just, you know, give them the validation of, you know, you guys worked on this, thank you for working on it, like we want to hear about it. So that's why I requested that we get that presentation. So, all right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.